I let Kirsten talk after camp, so I had to let the twin sister talk, It's got to be fair. And we're talking about twins again today. It's going to be awesome. We are a part of something way bigger than we know and what we think about on a regular basis. Man, that last song and the scripture that Nick read right before that kind of put us in the heavenly realms, right? And if you think about, like, man, let's just fast forward past all the end time stuff that we all argue about. We're going to just bypass that for right now. And we're in the new heavens, new earth. Just imagine this for a moment, right? As Revelation 21 says, the new Jerusalem comes down out of heaven, fuses with earth, and sin is gone. It's banished away. Death is gone. Sickness and all the hate and everything is gone. Political ads are gone. All the politicians, I'm not going to go there. But all the bad stuff is gone. And the greatest thing of all is Revelation 21, verse 6, that says, the dwelling place of God is now with man. That's incredible to think about. Man, when we are experiencing this, man, the joy will be so immense. Our satisfaction will be to no end. Like, it'll be beyond comprehension when we are experiencing the new heavens and new earth. Man, just dwell there for a moment. And then imagine somebody just kind of walks along and is like, well, aren't you glad that I did this for you? Aren't you, man, I did so much to make this happen. Like, you would look at him and be like, who the heck do you think you are? Right? You might even say something different. But you're going to be like, man, you're nuts. You didn't do this. The only explanation for the immense joy and glory of the new heavens and new earth that we will experience, the only explanation could be God himself through the Lamb, Jesus Christ. That is the only explanation. Like, to think that we would play a role in this when we're in heaven and just thinking, like, we played a role in this, that's laughable, right? But how often do we live our life not really connected to what Jesus is doing? How often do we live not really thinking about the Messiah? How often do we neglect thinking about that God is making the new heavens and new earth? God is bringing forth the new creation. He is ushering in his kingdom. How often are we neglecting that? And yet we were born again and transferred from the dominion of darkness to the kingdom of Jesus in order to be a part of making all things new and bringing in the new creation. Right? When we're in the new heavens and new earth, of course we're not going to say, well, this was because of me. Right? It's not because of my, intellect that we did this, or this isn't because of my schemes or my power that we did this. But we're going to say, man, in the Messiah, empowered by the Spirit, we were a part of what Jesus was doing. The more we can have the conviction that we are a part of something so much bigger than ourselves, the less we will do really dumb, foolish stuff, even in the name of Jesus. Even in our Christian faith. And the more we will be faithful instruments of God. And so this is the big idea. Like, the first part of this big idea is like the pithy statement that you can remember and grab a hold of. It's that we are a part of something bigger than ourselves. Right? That can pull at your heartstrings. You can memorize that. But now I'm going to give a little nerdier definition of what that even means. What are we a part of that's so much bigger than ourselves? And it's this: grow in faith to see all of your life as being in the Messiah in order to be his faithful instrument to carry out his will. That's kind of a mouthful, but that's what I'm going to unpack from this story of Isaac blessing Jacob and, I'll put in air quotes, Esau. But anyways, we are going through Hebrews 11, so if you have your Bibles, you can turn to Hebrews 11. We're only going to be looking at one verse in Hebrews 11, and then a whole slew of verses in Genesis. So you'll have to hang on and try to keep up, right? But Hebrews 11 is what we call the Faith Hall of Fame. By faith, Abel offered a better sacrifice than Cain, and then there's Enoch, and then there's Noah, then there's Abraham, and now we are to Isaac. And it's always this by faith. And the big overarching purpose of Hebrews is that there is this group of Jewish Christians who are having a really rough go of it because of their allegiance to Jesus, and they're like tempted to give up and throw in the towel because of how hard it is. And the author of Hebrews is saying, no, keep going, persevere by faith. That is what the big overarching picture here is. And so here is Hebrews 11, chapter 11, verse 20, and this is for our verse this morning. By faith, Isaac invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. By faith, Isaac invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. Now, the word invoke, if you're not reading from an ESV, you have a different version, you probably don't have the word invoked there, and it's actually not technically in the Greek, but it probably is in some way, shape, or form implied because of the nature of the prophetic nature of biblical blessings. Now, if I had a time machine and went back to Monday, I would probably have at least been tempted to do a whole sermon first just laying out biblical blessings, because it's way different than how we say it. You know, somebody sneezes and we say, bless you, right? That's a little bit different than those weird superstitions with evil spirits and losing your soul, right? That's kind of nonsense, right? But biblical blessing is when God is imparting himself to somebody or a group of people like Israel, and he is imparting himself in order to empower them to carry out his purposes. It is for our joy, but blessings are never just for them. Blessings are never just for you. It's for you to bless others. But to just give a quick example, Adam and Eve, the first ones to be recorded as blessed by God, the blessing is sandwiched in between the call to have dominion over all creation and then to be fruitful and multiply. Right between those two things is this blessing of God. This is God empowering them with himself to carry out his reign over creation and to, be fruitful and multiply, procreate. But it's more than just having babies. It's having children who will be raised up to carry out this reign as well. That's what the whole thing is about. And so when you think of biblical blessings, that's the grand narrative. God blessing people, and in order that they be a part of God's master plan, in their case, to bring forth the Christ, and on our side of Jesus, that we are immensely blessed in the Messiah, so that we can be a part of carrying out his will to make all things new. And so whenever you see blessing in the Bible, you should always have it connected to that grand narrative, or that big thread throughout the narrative of the Bible. And so in this case, Isaac is blessing Jacob and Esau. We're going to see it's primarily Jacob. And it is for the purpose of making Jacob the recipient of the covenant and the promises that was first given to Abraham, then to Isaac, now to Jacob, and then eventually to Judah, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and from him would come the Christ. And so this is why I'm saying Isaac and him blessing Jacob and Esau, they are a part of something so much bigger than themselves. But as we saw last week, Abraham and Sarah failed to see that. They were impatient and took matters into their own hands, and then after making a big mess of things, they laugh at God's plan, and they're just like, well, Ishmael's good enough. Right? That's something you say when you don't have this conviction that you're a part of something so much bigger than yourselves. You're just satisfied with this. Right? And it's not God's will. The will of man they're content with instead of the will of God. And we're going to see something pretty similar today. It was a big family mess last week. We're going to have a bigger one this week. It's going to be great fun. We'll see if it's great fun. Anyways, that's where we're at with Hebrews 11, verse 20. Now we're going to go back to Genesis, and we're going to go clear back to Genesis 25, and we're going to go clear back to the womb of Rebekah. Now, there's multiple characters in this story. So you have Isaac is the dad, Rebekah is his wife, and then they're going to have twins. Esau is the firstborn, and then Jacob. Now, when there's this many characters in a story, my brain can't comprehend it, and so I'm probably going to call somebody by the wrong name, right? My kids know this very well, right? It's like, Ryle, get over here. My name's Boaz. Get over here anyways, right? It's going to be the same type of thing. So if I say the wrong name, just you know what I mean, okay? So we are going to look at chapter 25, verse 21 through 26. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. Now they're in their 60s, and the promise was going to be that he would also have a descendant. So that's why he's like praying, like, well, if I'm going to be if there's this covenant and promise, there's got to be more to it than just us. And so he's praying in line with God's will that they would have a child. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" It's a really awkward verse, but really what's going on is that Rebekah's like, well, if this is the covenant, like this seems like we're having issues with our pregnancy right now, and so like if something happens here, this isn't good because this is supposed to be where the covenant comes, and so she's inquiring of God, right? So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other." Very important statement coming up. "The older shall serve the younger." Every oldest child right now is just blood curdling and blood pressure rising, and younger siblings are like, dang right. Yeah, right? Verse 24. When her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first one came out red, and all his body like a hairy cloak. So they called his name Esau, which means hairy or rough. Insert own joke about Pastor here. Anyways, afterwards his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob, which literally means grabs by the heel, usually with a connotation of a cheater. And then Isaac was 60 years old when he gave birth to them. Here is the big, massive thing to get from this text for the whole duration of the story. God is showing this is his sovereign choice. The older shall serve the younger. So that means Jacob is going to be the one that God is choosing to be the recipient of the covenants and the promises, and everything's going to go through him in order to get to the next generation and the next generation on down to Jesus. This is abnormal. Right? We also saw last week it was a very abnormal birth because Sarah was 90 and Abraham was 100. Right? I said God was doing that in order to get our attention, to show this is a very special birth because God's doing this very special thing. This is a really big thing that God is doing in order to show that, from Abraham would be Isaac and then Jacob and then Judah and then the Christ eventually. Right? And so God is saying, well, I'm doing something weird here also to get your attention. It's not going to be through the oldest son. It's going to be through the second son. Right? And so God is saying, it is my sovereign choice. Most likely that's kind of the reason why he's doing it that way. But what we do know for sure, 100% sure, because the Apostle Paul in the always controversial Romans 9, right? He says, it is before they were born, before they had done anything good or bad, not because of works, but because of him who calls, it was said to them, the older shall serve the younger. Right? And so this was God's sovereign choice. It was not dependent on the fact that Esau would sell his birthright. I'll get to that here in a second. It wasn't dependent on that. Right? It also wasn't dependent, or it wasn't because Jacob was going to be this really big, bright light of faithfulness. Because as we will see in a moment, that's laughable. He's not. It can't be because of that. And so we're left with this is God's sovereign choice. And so that's what we are to gain from this text. But as we go on, we're going to see it is played out in through some very messy and sinful and deceptive means. Now, as we go on in the narrative, before I get into it, years ago, like when I was a young pastor and green and naive, I used to approach like marriage conflicts or family conflicts with, okay, who's telling the truth and who's being accurate and who's lying and being inaccurate. In my being naive, that's how I approach the situations, right? And I have come to realize that that's naive. I always assume that somebody is lying and being inaccurate, but I no longer approach these situations as if somebody is telling the truth. They may be, but I am no longer assuming that they are. Right? I hope that somebody is, so we can get to the bottom of things, but rarely is somebody telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Right? Usually it's a little bit of bending of the truth sometimes, or just all-out lies. Right? This has happened many times. I've been duped many times in certain situations, and so I don't approach them as if somebody is always telling the truth. And this verse is actually partly why, or this section is partly why, because everyone is in the wrong in this section. Nobody's telling the truth. Nobody's being accurate. Nobody's being in the right or good. They're all a bunch of yahoos, right? They're a bunch of wackos, and they're not telling the truth. Nobody is in the right. And yet somehow, I talked about God's sovereign choice, somehow in the midst of a crazy family mess, lots of deception, nobody in the right, God is still going to manage to get his will to be accomplished. This is our God. And so, we start with Esau. Esau was out hunting, and apparently he didn't get much that day, and he was famished. He comes in, and Jacob had this big bowl of stew, and Esau's like, I'm starving, give me some of your stew. And Jacob's like, okay, you can have some of my stew if you sell me your birthright. And so Esau sells his birthright for a bowl of soup. Now, he says he was starving. We don't know if he was really starving. And later on, Esau will even say that Jacob cheated him out of his birthright. No, he didn't. There was no fine print. Jacob just says, sell me your birthright. And Esau agreed to it. There was no deception on Jacob's behalf that time. We'll get to that. But later on in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 16, it says Esau was unholy, or Esau was one who profaned God, or profaned the temple, or profaned, in this case, profaned his status with God. He counted it as not that big of a deal. And this is how he profaned it, or was counted unholy, because he sold his birthright for a mere bowl of soup. So Esau was of the status that should have received the covenants and the promises, and he willy-nilly sells it to Jacob for a mere bowl of soup. Now, we go back to God's sovereign choice. God chose it was going to be Jacob, and this is how the means by which it happened, but this doesn't make Esau's actions any less sinful. He's very much in the wrong here. And so Esau's the first one we see in the wrong for just not treating his status as the firstborn as, not that big of a deal. He's profaning his status with God, right? And so this is why it has been passed down to Jacob. This is the first installment, we could say. And so God is still carrying out his will, and Esau is in the wrong, even though this is getting to God's will to be taking place. You see how complicated it is to be God? Right? You think your life is complicated? You don't hold a candle to God. I'm not done. Now we come to Isaac and Rebekah. And before I get to this shenanigans that happen here, we have to read Genesis 25, verse 27 through 28. It says, when the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, man of the field, while Jacob was a quieter man, dwelling in tents. And here's the big thing. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game or the food that he hunted, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, I don't think this verse means that they didn't love the other kid. It's that they had favoritism. And their favoritism, as we are going to see, clouds their judgment. Right? This is bad news. Favoritism in your own family can cloud your judgment. Favoritism in the church can cloud your judgment. Favoritism at work can cloud your judgment. We need to be careful with this favoritism in our hearts. We're going to see it play out here. And so we start with Isaac. Isaac at this point is old. He's blind. He knows he doesn't have a long life left. And so he calls Esau and says, hey, I want you to go hunt, bring the game back, prepare it the way that you know I like it, and then I will bless you. Seems innocent enough. He wants to bless his eldest son. There's nothing wrong with that. Except for, as we are going to see, Isaac has full intention of giving the blessing of Abraham with the covenants and promises to Esau. Even though it's God's will, and it was even said to Rebekah that the older shall serve the younger. Don't know how much they've pieced this all together at this point. But anyways, Isaac is going to attempt to try to give this blessing to Esau, his firstborn, the one he would naturally give it to. But we see Isaac then is in the wrong because he is wrongly distributing the blessing, or he's going to attempt to wrongly distribute the blessing to the wrong son, according to God's will. Right? So Isaac is in the wrong. His judgment is clouded. But then there's Rebekah. Rebekah, her brother is Laban. We're going to meet Laban next week, and he's just as much of a cunning conniver as Rebekah is and Jacob is. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as we will see. But Rebekah overhears Isaac say this to Esau. And so when Esau is strolling out of earshot, she's like, Jacob, come here. I want you to go disguise yourself as Esau. Go into your father. I'll help you make the meal. And then he will bless you instead of Esau. Right? And the great big hole in this plan was that, remember, Esau was a hairy man. Right? And Jacob is smooth-skinned. And so the idea for Rebekah was, okay, we'll use animal fur to put on your arms so that if he feels your arms, he'll feel the animal fur. And as I've always thought, like, it took animal fur? Like, this dude is hairier than me, man. Like, this guy's got to be like this woolly man. Like, holy cow, if it took animal fur, right? And so this happens, and so she prepares the meal, and Esau's still out, and so Jacob's looking around. I don't see him, so okay, I'm going to go in. And he says, I'm here. I'm Esau. I'm here for you to bless me. And it seems like Isaac is on to him because it's like, it sounds like Jacob, but I know that it's supposed to be Esau coming in here, and he's like, come, let me feel you. And he feels the animal fur. He's still not 100% convinced. And so then, this is where we pick up Genesis 27, verse 26. Then his father Isaac said to him, come near and kiss me, my son. And so he came near and kissed him. And Isaac smelled the smell of the garments, the pretend garments, and blessed him and said, see the smell of my son. So now he's convinced it's Esau. My son is as the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. So the older shall serve the younger, right? And then we get this. Cursed be everyone who has cursed you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. That is verbatim the original covenant and promises given to Abraham in Genesis 12. This is very much connected. Isaac is very much trying to bless Esau with the covenants and promises wrongly here, right? However, Rebekah and Jacob are very much in the wrong in their deceitfulness in doing this. Even though they're getting the right son blessed with the covenants and promises, they're doing it through very deceitful and evil and sinful means. I don't know if you need to be told this. You do not have to help God get his will to be accomplished. You don't need to be deceitful. You don't need to be crafty and conniving and, crafty. I use that word. Is somebody else called crafty in the Bible? Oh yeah, the devil, Satan, right? We don't need to be like him in order to get God's will to be accomplished. We can just be faithful and obedient. God will take care of it. Even if it seems like you have to take matters into your own hands like Rebekah did. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be deceptive. Just let God be God, right? And so we see everybody is in the wrong. This is big old mess. But don't forget about Esau. He's coming back in. He got his game. He killed something. I don't know what it was. And he brought it in. He prepared it the way his dad likes it. And he's ready to bring it in. Now, I want you to imagine, kids, you can resonate with this. You'll probably be mad at this too. But like imagine you're the older child, if you're not, and you've been begging your parents for this thing for Christmas, a new bike, a telescope, whatever. Right? You want this new thing, and you're pretty convinced you're going to get it. Like your parents seem to be letting on that you're going to get this. And so you come walking down this, you're walking down the steps on Christmas, give me a break, running down the steps on Christmas, and you get to your presents, and you're opening presents, and your younger sibling gets the thing that you really wanted, and you got socks. Right? Ooh. Right? I mean, you can just, the blood pressure rising again, right? That's kind of what it's like for Esau right now, because he's coming in with his food that he just prepared for his dad. He's probably whistling, and he's happy because he's about to be blessed, and he's happy. And then we get this. Chapter 27, verse 33. Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me, and I ate it before you came, and I have blessed him, and yes, he shall be blessed." You hear the prophetic nature of that? Yes, he shall be blessed. Like Isaac knows he can't take it back. He knows that blessing and covenants went to the correct son. He's just not happy about it because it came through deceitful means, right? And so this is God's will being played out in a completely chaotic mess, full of deception, full of sin, full of trying to take matters into our own hands, as if we are needed to carry out this type of thing, to carry out God's will. Now, after this, Esau is understandably angry, and he wants to kill Jacob, and so Rebekah overhears it and is like, "You better go back to my home place and try to find a wife there." And so he's going to be sent off. We don't know how long of time took place between this crazy deceitfulness and the time he is sent off. But we see Isaac is now re-giving the blessing to Isaac. And this time he fully has his wits. He knows who he's blessing. And he knows from God, the older shall serve the younger. And he knows that the covenants and promises from Abraham to him and now are going to be to Jacob. And so we see this in the final blessing of Isaac to Jacob in verse 27, verse 39. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, "Behold, away from the fatness..." Oh, that was the wrong one. I'm just kidding. Genesis 28, verse 3 through 4. "God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, and you may become a company of peoples. May he give you the blessing of Abraham, and to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings that God gave to Abraham." And so, notice it's offspring and not offsprings, as the Apostle Paul says in Galatians 3:16. It's not offsprings, but offspring, because the whole thing is pointing to one offspring, and that is Jesus. So that's the big, messy story. There's way more that could be said about the narrative, but I think you get the point. Because they failed to see that they were a part of something so much bigger than themselves, there's no way they can accomplish this great, massive plan of God to bring forth the Messiah. It's way bigger than them. But yet God invites them to be a part of it, but they treat it as, it's not that big of a deal. Or they're deceptive within it, or they're letting their favoritism cloud their judgment. Or from last week, they're impatient, and that leads to taking matters into their own hands with Ishmael and Hagar, right? And that's what we can do. And man, we can do the same thing, can't we? Right? If we don't realize how big of a deal it is that we are in the Messiah through the death and resurrection of Jesus, if we don't see how big of a deal this is, that we are in the Messiah who is making all things new, we're just going to live our life not really thinking that much of it. Be like Esau, just, I'll sell my birthright for a mere bowl of soup. Not that big of a deal. Or I'm just going to I want my way to happen. I want, in the favoritism, I want my way to happen, so I'm just going to pursue it my way and do things my way, as if my way is going to produce what we will experience in the new heavens and new earth. Ridiculous. But the more we have this conviction, the more we will just rely upon God, and we will trust in Him with our whole hearts, lean not on our own understanding, and trust in the Lord, and that's when we will be faithful instruments of God. But even in the midst of that, in the midst of this crazy narrative, and in the midst of church history, through the Reformation, through the church history even up to today and the crazy political climate we have today, we see a God who works in mess, right? He works in political mess. He works in national and world mess. He works in family mess, as we see here. He works in mess. My professor in seminary named Dr. David Priestley, wonderful man of God, wonderful lecturer, very evil test giver. But anyways, he said, God works in mess, and if you don't like it, tough. I love and hate that quote, right? I hate the truthfulness of it because you have to live in it, but it's super good to remember that this is what God is doing. He works in mess. And so we just have to live with it, and we have to endure. We have to be prepared for it. And so in the midst of that, we cannot impatiently do things our own way or by our understanding and our power, because that's not going to create the new heavens and new earth. But when we come to the conviction that we are indeed a part of something bigger than ourselves, that's when we will wait patiently for the Lord. That's when we will wait and do it the Lord's way. That's when we won't let our favoritism get in the way, or what we want to get in the way. We're not going to allow how we want my life to go. We're not going to let it be like, well, this is the way I want church to be. We're not going to think like that. We're going to think, what is God calling us to do? How is He calling us to do it? Because that's what the blessing is. The blessing is God imparting to us that we actually do have a role to play in bringing forth the new heavens and new earth. So we're not going to be arrogantly walking around heaven saying, oh, do you see how I did this? You like what I did with the place? We're not going to be like that. But in the same breath, we say, man, we are a part of the Messiah who is doing this. We are His body. We are His hands and feet to do this. And this is an amazing thing to be a part of. Why would we do things on our own strength and power? But I do it all the time. We do it all the time. But let this be a reminder that we are a part of something so much bigger than ourselves, in order that we grow in faith to see all of our life as being in the Messiah, in order to be His faithful instruments to carry out His will. God, I pray that You would give us the strength to let go and to surrender our plans, our abilities, how we think things should go, our favoritism, our impatience, and let us trust in You 100% in faith. because we know you are building your kingdom here. You are making all things new. You are the one who will bring forth the new heavens and new earth. And one day we will be in it, and we will say, this is glorious beyond comprehension. There's no way this was done because of me. But yet through your power in us, we can have a role in doing this. Give us faith now as we sing and as we go to work on Monday, as we live our lives, knowing that we are a part of something so much bigger than ourselves. In Jesus' name, amen.